Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, and this is the Leather Element. If you've got a good question for us or a good idea for a leather element, drop it in the comment box below. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So a question I get all the time: I want to buy a piece of leather. What am I looking for? What do I want to avoid? We've got some good examples we're going to look at, but let's do this. First off, let's step over to our pattern table. Let's just go over a little baseline information on some hides. We're not going to go into great detail here, but this is some good background information, particularly for those of us who are new. Well, first and foremost, and we all have to keep this in mind, leather is a natural material. Unlike, say, a plastic part, looks just like the next or just like the last, every hide is different, and in fact, the environment can play a big part in this. And I bet our woodworking friends know exactly what we're talking about. Very similar situation. But because of this, hides are graded both to and from the tannery. We'll go into the tannery. Hides typically are either a 1, 2, or 3, or A, B, or C grade. Well, A or 1 being higher quality, C or 3 being a lower quality. Well, as a crafter, I might argue that point, and you'll see where we're going with that. But some of the factors that are going to determine the quality of a hide, well, all kinds of problems. First off, natural blemishes, range marks, brands, or actually one of the biggest, bug bites. In fact, the birds that eat the bugs on the cows, they too can be a problem. Well, maybe not. Well, let's back up, okay? So a ranch that uses barbed wire, they're not going to need a brand, so a little higher quality. Here's the downside. Cows just love to rub up on barbed wire to scratch. And cows are not dainty beasts by any means. So that's going to create some scratches or some scarring, range marks, or natural blemishes like the wrinkles, the neck wrinkles in a hide. Well, in all honesty, I want a piece of leather that's got a little character to it. But the production shops, they feel a little bit different, okay? Perfect example. How about a brand? I love to get a good brand on a hide. I've seen some pretty cool designs in brands. But really, all told, a brand's only going to take up about the size of a hand on a side. So really, we're only losing 2, 3, maybe 4% of that leather. Here's the cool part about a brand, though. Let's take that brand and let's put that on a briefcase flap or purse or pouch. Now we've got an absolutely unique product, none other like it in the world. And if we're going to sell it, we get to charge a little bit more money for it. So I love a good brand. But the saddle shops, they can't use a brand. They need very big, very clean panels. So again, for us crafters, we might could save a little bit of money and get a piece of leather that's just as good. Now, one more point. The tanneries, they play the biggest part in this. So let's step over to our big table and talk about that. Now, I mentioned saving some money. Well, to a point. For us craft folks, the budget, well, it's always a concern. We're not driven by profit. We're more in it for the love of the craft. So say with a veg tan, great example. We've got a grade A hide going into a tannery, but it's a tannery that specializes in more economical tannage, or maybe they just want to shoot that leather out. What's going to happen is we're going to get a piece of leather that's weirdly stiff or weirdly soft. If we want a stamp or tool, it's just not going to take that stamp or that tooling. Doesn't matter how well we case it. Our die is probably going to pool. Here's the biggest problem, and we've all done this. We get a cheap piece of leather, we make a belt. We spend all this time on this belt. The last thing we do is our bend back for our buckle, our top grain cracks. Well, how much money have we actually saved, right? Okay, well, the other side of that coin. Let's look for a quality tannage. Herman Oak, Weaver Select. These are my two favorites because, and I joke, these almost stamp themselves or they almost tool themselves. When we case this leather and we drop in a stamp, we hit it once and it's a beautiful, clean impression. Less frustration. But the big point here is that if we spend a little more money, buy a quality piece of leather, what's going to happen is our projects are going to look better. Even though our skills have not increased, our project is going to look better because we started with a quality piece of leather. Okay, so we've spent plenty of time talking. Let's jump over to our punch table, actually look at what I'm talking about. In all honesty, this scene's been a stress point for me, but for an odd reason. I work for Weaver Leather. Every piece of leather in my shop is from Weaver. I literally cannot find a cut of leather in this shop that would make a good example of what we want to avoid when buying leather. Well, I've got a small cutting from a belly here, and we can expect a belly to be a little bit rough, even though it's a quality hide, as long as these issues don't persist across the hide. But right here, you can see we're already starting to work into good leather. But we've got some issues here that we want to avoid. Well, right off the bat, notice that bend. Notice how supple and soft that is. Actually, the top grain is starting to separate from the balance of the hide. We can't edge that. We can't stamp it, tool it. If we add dye to that, even a light brown dye is going to come out chocolate. It's going to stick in that area, and it will never stop rubbing off. So we want to avoid that absolutely. We're going to look at a better example here. You'll see on that point what I'm talking about. But let's flip over, because here, this is another big issue. Again, down towards the belly, well, that's just the way it is. But notice the fuzz, and this is not nearly as bad as most that I've seen. But we cannot skive that, cut that, trim that, peel that. Everything we do to that is going to make it worse. Well, right off the bat, I can tell that that's indicative of a rough piece of leather that I'm not going to use. So let's watch for that fuzz. A little bit down here, no problem. But as long as that doesn't work across our hide, we're okay. All right, so there's all the bad news. Well, let's jump over to the good news. So I've got 3 separate hides here. So this is our Weaver Select. This looks to be about a 6 to 7 ounce. Right off the bat, I can feel it. It's firm. It's got some good body to it. My top grain, absolutely smooth. Let's look at our flesh side. In fact, I almost want to look at the flesh side before I look at the top grain. But notice how smooth and consistent that is. That's a quality piece of leather. It's not too stiff, not too flimsy. And again, I can actually feel that. Right here, this is about a 3 to 4 ounce. Notice again, the flesh side, absolutely clean and consistent. The top grain, beautiful and clean. And yet, another hide. So we've seen the issues, but the biggest point here is that if we start with a quality leather, even though our skills don't increase, our projects are going to look so much better. I would love to see and feel each and every piece of leather I buy, but for the majority of us, that simply isn't possible. Here's the answer to every bit of this. Just call us at Weaver Leather. We sell quality leather from quality tanneries, and I guarantee you, the first time you put a stamp on some Herman Oak or some Weaver Select, there's only going to be one thought in your mind: worth every penny. I hope this is good information for you. Thanks for taking time to watch The Leather Element. Good luck with your projects.